Hey everyone, welcome to another Deep Dives, and this time we're talking about adding more life to those years after 50.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're taking a close look at Thriving Beyond 50, this book that, well, you sent over.
Yeah.
And it's full of ways to stay strong, mobile, as we age.
hmm
I know you were particularly interested in avoiding those common pitfalls that can make aging feel, well, not so great.
Yeah, and I think you're definitely not alone in that. A lot of folks just kind of assume that aches and pains and just feeling limited is just part of getting older, but
Yeah,
this book challenges that. It
right.
really challenges that idea.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how much it emphasizes that a lot of age-related issues are actually preventable and
Mhm.
even treatable with the right approach.
That is really encouraging. The author, who's a physiotherapist, even points to research showing that older people can actually reverse muscle loss, get stronger.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned you were worried about losing your balance.
Mm-hmm.
Could strength help with that?
Absolutely. Strength is like your secret weapon for staying steady on your feet.
Okay.
The book really emphasizes how being strong protects you from injuries, supports your joints,
Uh-huh.
eases those aches and pains, even gives you a boost of confidence. It's not just about, lifting weights. It's about feeling capable and empowered in your body.
I love that perspective.
Mhm.
Speaking of feeling empowered, the book introduces this concept called 9 at 90.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So the 9 at 90 refers to 9 key movements that, if you can maintain, significantly increase your chances of a healthy and active life,
Hmm.
even into your 90s. And these aren't, crazy athletic feats or anything.
Right.
They're everyday movements that just become more challenging, right?
Right.
As we age.
Right.
And the book makes this argument that preserving your ability to do these things just makes a world of difference.
So give me an example of one of these movements. Like, what are we talking about here?
Well, one that really stood out to me was called the floor get up. And it sounds deceptively simple, but the ability to get up from the floor without assistance
Hmm.
is a really strong indicator of your overall strength and balance.
Right.
And it also, directly relates to preventing falls, which of course can be more of a concern as we get older.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense.
Okay.
I see how that could be crucial. So I imagine the other 8 movements are similarly practical and important.
Yeah, definitely.
What's another one that comes to mind?
Well, there's one called the 5-mile walk,
Okay.
which might seem like a lot, but the book stresses that endurance, even at a walking pace,
Right.
is vital for overall health and longevity.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a marathon runner, but maintaining your ability to walk for, longer distances helps keep your heart, your lungs, even your mind sharp.
So it's not just about strength. It's about functional fitness, being
Yeah.
able to move well and do the things you enjoy.
Exactly. And that brings us to an area that many people struggle with, especially as they spend more time sitting. Neck and shoulders.
Yeah.
The book refers to this as the posture problem.
Wow.
And I think you mentioned you were dealing with some stiffness in that area yourself.
Yes. Yes, I've been working from home a lot lately, and I've definitely noticed more tension in my neck and shoulders.
It's a common experience.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that a stiff mid-back can actually be a major contributor to neck pain. When your thoracic spine, that middle part of your back, loses mobility,
Right.
your neck has to overcompensate, and that leads to all that tension and discomfort.
That's surprising. I thought the problem was just in my neck right there. So what can I do about this stiff mid-back?
Well, the book suggests something as simple as setting a timer to break up prolonged sitting every 30 minutes. Just stand up, stretch,
Yeah.
reset your posture. It's a small change, but it can have big benefits.
I can definitely try that. It seems manageable,
Yeah.
and I like the idea of being more proactive about my posture.
Speaking of being proactive, let's debunk a common myth about back pain. It's not always a sign of serious damage, even though a lot of people assume it is.
Really. I think a lot of people, myself included, we tend to think that back pain equals something like a slipped disc.
Yeah, it's understandable, but the book highlights that a lot of cases of back pain actually stem from muscle imbalances, the way we move, and even how our brains process those pain signals. They tell this fascinating story about a patient with chronic back pain whose MRI showed absolutely nothing abnormal.
Wow, that's a powerful reminder that pain can be complex and not always a sign of something really dire.
Exactly. And speaking of those complex connections,
Uh-huh.
have you ever noticed a relationship between your hip mobility and your knee pain?
Now that you mention it, I have had some knee pain lately. Is it possible that my hips are contributing to that?
It's more common than you might think.
Hmm.
Tight or weak hips can throw off your alignment
Okay.
and put extra stress on your knees. And the book even delves into clicking knees,
Oh.
which you mentioned experiencing.
Yeah.
It's not always a cause for concern, but it can be a sign that there are some imbalances in your movement patterns that need a little attention.
That's good to know. I was starting to worry about the clicking.
Yeah.
Is there anything I could do to improve my hip mobility? Hopefully that would ease the knee pain too.
Absolutely. There are targeted exercises that can help. The book even mentions that something as simple as walking in a swimming pool can be really beneficial for knee pain sufferers
Okay.
because it takes the pressure off the joints while still providing a good workout.
That's a great tip. I'm always looking for ways to stay active without uh, aggravating my joints. Now, is there anything else that can contribute to knee pain that we should be aware of?
Well, there's a muscle that often gets overlooked when it comes to knee stability, the gluteus medius.
The what?
The gluteus medius.
Okay.
It's a hip muscle that plays a crucial role in stabilizing your knees, and weakness in this muscle can lead to all sorts of problems.
Okay. Yeah. I've never even heard of that muscle before. So if I strengthen my gluteus medius, it could help with my knee pain.
Exactly. And the book actually includes a simple priming exercise that you can do to activate that gluteus medius and improve your knee function. I love how, this book is full of actionable tips like this.
Me too. It's one thing to understand the problems,
Right.
but it's even better to have some concrete solutions.
Absolutely. And since we're talking about taking action, we can't forget about foot fitness.
Foot fitness, to be honest, I don't think much about my feet beyond putting on my shoes.
That's understandable, but the book emphasizes how crucial ankle and foot mobility are for your entire lower body. They even discuss how flat feet, which might seem like a minor issue, can actually cause problems all the way up the kinetic chain, affecting your knees, hips, and even your back.
Wow. I never would have guessed that my feet could have such a big impact on my overall health.
It's fascinating, how interconnected our bodies are. And the good news is that there are simple exercises that can help. The book recommends a really easy one called the towel scrunch
Okay.
to strengthen those neglected foot muscles.
Imagine improving your back health by working on your feet. This is why I find this whole deep dive so intriguing.
Yeah.
There are so many unexpected connections.
Now, before we move on, let's talk about a silent aggravator that can impact almost every aspect of our health.
Okay.
Inflammation.
Inflammation. That's a word we hear a lot these days. I'm not sure I fully understand what it means.
Well, the book does a great job of kind of breaking down inflammation into two types.
Okay.
There's local inflammation, which is the helpful kind. That's part of the healing process. When you sprain your ankle and you get swelling, that's local inflammation. It's helping to repair the damage.
Got it.
But then there's global inflammation, which is more systemic.
Okay.
And that's the kind that's linked to a whole host of health issues.
So global inflammation is like a bad thing.
Think of global inflammation like rust slowly affecting your whole body. And it can be triggered by things like, constantly eating processed foods, being under a lot of stress, or not getting enough sleep.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense now. So how do we keep this rust at bay? What can we do?
Well, the book goes into a lot of helpful advice on managing inflammation.
Okay.
And we'll definitely dive deeper into that later. But for now, it's important to understand that the choices we make every day, from the foods we eat to the amount of sleep we get, can either fuel or fight inflammation.
Wow. This is already a lot to take in, but it's so eye-opening. I'm starting to see how everything is connected.
Yeah, it's all part of a bigger picture, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
Let's move on to another critical piece of the puzzle. Hormones.
Okay.
I know this is a topic that you're particularly interested in, especially as you mentioned some concerns about osteoporosis.
Yes. Hormones have definitely been on my mind lately. I know they can be a bit of a roller coaster as we age, especially for women.
Yeah, the book explains how changing hormones, particularly for women, can influence bone health and contribute to osteoporosis.
So there's a direct connection between my changing hormones and my risk of osteoporosis.
Exactly. And while we can't stop the aging process,
Right.
the book highlights natural ways to support bone health and mitigate those risks, including diet, exercise, and managing stress.
That's encouraging to hear. I'm definitely ready to learn more about that.
And speaking of taking control, let's talk about an anti-aging ally that can really make a difference: resistance training.
I'm all ears. I've heard that strength training is important as we age, but I'm not really sure where to start.
Well, this book is a huge advocate for resistance training. They explain how it helps maintain muscle mass, strength, bone density, all essential for staying active and independent as we age. And the great thing is, you don't need a fancy gym membership to reap the benefits.
That's good to know. I was a bit intimidated by the thought of joining a gym.
Yeah. You can start at home with simple exercises using your own body weight or some basic equipment. They even offer a free resource with a guide to the top 5 exercises for people over 50.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I should know about resistance training?
Well, just remember that proper form is important to avoid injuries.
Right.
And it's crucial to listen to your body. Don't push yourself to the limit. Find a sustainable routine that you can stick with for the long haul.
Great advice. I'm starting to feel like I have a much better understanding of how to approach exercise as I get older.
That's fantastic. And before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we can't forget about the mind-body connection.
The mind-body connection.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with aging well?
Well, the book dedicates an entire section to this topic, emphasizing how important mental well-being is for our overall health and longevity.
Okay.
And it turns out that chronic stress can actually negatively impact our physical health, increasing the risk of everything from heart disease to depression.
That's a bit scary to think about.
Yeah.
I know I've been feeling more stressed lately,
Yeah.
and it's definitely affecting my sleep.
Stress is a natural part of life,
Right.
but it's how we manage it that matters. The book provides some really practical tips for reducing stress, including mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises, and even something as simple as laughing more often.
I love the idea of laughing more.
Yeah.
It definitely feels good.
And don't underestimate the power of human connection. Talking to loved ones or even seeking support from a therapist can make a huge difference in managing stress and improving our mental well-being.
That's a good reminder. I tend to isolate myself when I'm feeling stressed,
Yeah.
but I know that's probably not the best approach.
The book even shares some fascinating research about the power of human touch, showing how something as simple as holding hands with a loved one can actually reduce pain.
Wow.
It's a beautiful example of how interconnected our minds and bodies truly are.
That's amazing. It makes you realize how much power we have to influence our own well-being.
Exactly. And we've only just begun to explore the wealth of information packed into this book, Thriving Beyond 50.
Yeah.
There's so much more to uncover, and we'll delve even deeper in part 2 of this deep dive.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into Thriving Beyond 50.
Yeah.
We've already covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there's still so much more to explore in this fascinating book.
I'm eager to keep going. You know, one thing that stood out to me the last section was how important it is to understand how our bodies work. You know, like the book does a great job of explaining some of those common terms, like core and inflammation, so we can really grasp the strategies they're recommending.
It's true. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to taking control of our health. And they also talk about the difference between just general activity and targeted exercise, explaining how it's not just about moving more, but moving well.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you've been thinking about incorporating more exercise into your routine. So this distinction might be helpful as you explore different options.
That's a good point. I've definitely been guilty of just trying to get my steps in without thinking much about what those steps are actually doing for me.
It's a common mistake.
Yeah.
The book also makes a great point about how muscle imbalances can develop over years without us even realizing it, leading to pain or injuries seemingly out of nowhere. It's like a ticking time bomb.
So how do we avoid that? How can we detect these imbalances before they become big problems?
Well, the book encourages us to pay attention to even subtle signs of discomfort or stiffness rather than just pushing through them. You know, they advocate for being proactive and addressing those imbalances with targeted exercises and stretches.
And they highlight a principle that I think is really important, the idea of treating the cause, not the symptom.
So it's not just about masking the pain, it's about getting to the root of the problem.
Precisely. They really advocate for this holistic approach, considering factors like lifestyle, sleep, stress, even our mental outlook when addressing pain or limitations.
Okay.
The author actually shares a personal story about a shoulder injury that took them 3 years to fully recover from,
Wow.
emphasizing that healing takes time and a multifaceted approach.
3 years is a long time.
Yeah.
What were some of the key things they did to finally heal?
Well, they talk about how important it was to not only address the physical aspects of the injury, but also the mental and emotional aspects.
Hmm.
They had to learn to be patient with the healing process and view setbacks as learning opportunities, not failures.
Okay.
They also emphasize the importance of working with qualified healthcare professionals to get personalized guidance. That's a really empowering perspective, turning a challenging experience into a learning opportunity.
Speaking of challenges, let's talk about a specific issue that you mentioned experiencing, wrist pain.
Yes.
The book delves into the dreaded carpal tunnel syndrome,
Oh, yeah.
which can be a real nuisance.
Yes. My wrist's been bothering me lately, especially after long days of typing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it could be carpal tunnel.
It's certainly possible. The book explains how repetitive movements,
Mm,
like typing and using a mouse, can irritate the median nerve in the wrist,
right.
leading to those familiar symptoms of tingling,
Yeah.
numbness, and pain. You mentioned that you've been working from home more.
Uh,
Have you noticed any changes in your workspace setup that might be contributing to the problem?
Now that you mention it, my desk setup at home isn't as ergonomic as it could be.
That's a good observation. The book stresses the importance of having a properly set up workspace
Right.
with an ergonomic chair, a monitor at eye level.
Ah.
They also suggest some practical tips like taking regular breaks, adjusting your wrist position, and even doing some simple stretches to relieve tension.
So even small adjustments can make a difference.
Absolutely. They recommend breaking up work into, say, half-hour chunks, taking 2 minutes to stand up, stretch, and rest your hands. These micro breaks can be surprisingly effective.
Right.
They also offer some specific exercises to strengthen the wrist muscles, which can be helpful for both preventing and managing carpal tunnel symptoms.
Those sound like good habits to incorporate. I'm
Yeah.
definitely guilty of just powering through my work without taking enough breaks.
It's a common habit, but
Yeah.
taking those short breaks can actually make you more productive in the long run.
Okay.
Now, since we're talking about repetitive strain injuries, have you ever experienced pain on the inside of your elbow?
Now that you mention it, I have had some tenderness there, especially after playing badminton.
That could be a sign of golfer's elbow, which is another repetitive strain injury that can affect anyone who repeatedly uses the muscles in their forearm, not just golfers, as the name might suggest.
Okay.
The book explains how overuse can lead to inflammation and pain in the tendons that attach those muscles to the bone.
So even something as simple as playing badminton can trigger this.
Exactly. They give this great example in the book. Someone plays badminton for a bit longer than usual, and then they develop this tenderness on the inside of the elbow. That's
Yeah.
that early stage of golfer's elbow.
Right.
And if it's not addressed,
Yeah.
it can become, well, quite debilitating.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll definitely have to be more mindful of that. It's amazing how these seemingly minor things can have such a big impact.
It's all about understanding how our bodies work and being proactive about preventing problems.
Right.
And speaking of being proactive, let's talk about something that's absolutely essential for daily life. Grip strength.
Grip strength. I'm not sure I've ever thought about that before.
It's something we often take for granted. But maintaining grip strength is so crucial as we age. And it's not just about being able to open jars.
Right.
It's a reflection of our overall strength and vitality.
Really? So there's more to it than just like being able to carry my grocery bags.
Yeah. The book actually mentions some alarming research that links a decline in grip strength
Cool.
to poor health and even an increased risk of early death.
Wow. That's concerning. So how do we maintain our grip strength?
Well, the book recommends incorporating exercises that specifically target the muscles in your hands and forearms. Simple things like squeezing a stress ball or using hand grippers can be really helpful. They also highlight the importance of keeping our hands warm, especially for those who suffer from thumb arthritis.
That makes sense. I know my hands tend to get stiff when they're cold. I'm definitely going to start paying more attention to my grip strength now.
Yeah, it's a small thing that can make a big difference.
Okay.
Now let's revisit the importance of posture and ergonomics, especially since you mentioned spending more time at your computer these days.
Yes, that's definitely an area where I could use some improvement.
The book, really hammers home the importance of having a properly set up workspace
Yeah.
with that ergonomic chair and a monitor at eye level. But even with a perfect setup, they stress the importance of taking breaks to move around and reset our posture every 30 minutes or so.
So it's not enough to just have a good chair.
Right.
We need to actively incorporate movement into our work routine.
Exactly. They even suggest using a sand timer as a reminder to get up and move.
Mm.
And for bonus points, they recommend a standing desk so
Okay.
that you can alternate between sitting and standing
Yeah.
throughout the day.
I've heard good things about standing desks. I might have to look into that.
It's definitely worth considering, especially if you spend a significant amount of time at your computer.
Okay, let's talk about a topic that's been on my mind a lot lately.
Yeah.
Back pain.
Yeah.
Seems like everyone I know is dealing with it.
Back pain is incredibly common, especially as we age, but the book does a great job of dispelling some of the myths and misconceptions
Right.
surrounding it.
Okay.
They start by emphasizing that back pain doesn't always equal serious damage.
Really. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, myself included, we tend to assume that any back pain means there's something structurally wrong.
It's a natural assumption, but the book actually cites a study
Hmm.
that found disc degeneration in a high percentage of healthy individuals who weren't even experiencing back pain.
Okay.
So it's possible to have those structural changes without necessarily having pain.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So what does cause back pain if it's not always structural damage?
Well, the book highlights this complex interplay of physical, psychological, even social factors that can contribute to back pain.
Okay.
They stress the importance of understanding the different types of back pain
Right.
and seeking professional guidance to determine the best course of treatment.
So there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with back pain.
Definitely not. They share a really interesting case study about a patient who had been suffering from back pain for 9 months.
Wow.
She finally got an MRI, and it showed nothing abnormal.
Wow. That's a powerful example of how back pain isn't always straightforward.
It really underscores their point that it's crucial to rule out any serious issues before jumping to conclusions.
Right.
And since we're talking about back pain,
Yeah.
let's address a condition that can be incredibly debilitating, sciatica.
Oh, yes. I've heard horror stories about sciatica. What exactly is it?
Sciatica is a type of nerve pain that radiates down the leg,
Okay.
often caused by a herniated disc or other spinal issues.
Right.
The book provides a really clear explanation of the anatomy involved and how these conditions can lead to sciatica. The author even shares their personal experience with sciatica,
Oh.
which stemmed from a back injury while lifting weights.
So even someone who's, knowledgeable about the body and careful with their movements can still experience sciatica.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're all human
Yeah.
and vulnerable to injuries. The book emphasizes the importance of proper lifting technique
Okay.
and avoiding sudden movements, especially when lifting heavy objects.
Okay.
They also offer some specific exercises to help manage sciatica pain and promote healing.
I'm glad they offer solutions as well as explanations.
And one of the most surprising things they point out is the potential danger of stretching the sciatic nerve.
Really?
They explain how stretching can actually aggravate the condition and increase inflammation.
That's counterintuitive. I would have thought stretching would help.
It's a common misconception,
Right.
and it's a great example of how, well-intentioned actions can sometimes backfire if we don't really understand the underlying mechanisms at play.
This deep dive is really challenging my assumptions about aging and how my body works.
Yeah.
It's fascinating and a little overwhelming.
It's definitely a lot to take in, but ultimately it's about empowering ourselves with knowledge so we can make informed decisions about our health.
Yeah.
And we're not done yet. We'll be back in part 3
Okay.
to explore even more practical strategies for aging well.
All right, ready to dive into this last part of Thriving Beyond 50? Feel like we've been on this incredible journey, exploring all these secrets to aging well.
I agree. From the importance of strength training to understanding back pain, we've covered a lot of ground. But this final section is all about those extra steps we can take
Okay.
to really thrive. It's like a gold mine of these tips and tricks for maximizing our well-being.
Yeah.
They talk about diet, sleep, stress management, the importance of human connection, all things that, you mentioned you wanted to focus on.
Perfect. And I remember them talking about those 9 at 90, those key movements for maintaining independence as we get older. Can we circle back to that?
Absolutely. So 9 at 90 focuses on 9 everyday movements that are just so crucial for quality of life as we age. And we talked about, getting up from the floor and walking longer distances. They also emphasize being able to safely lift heavy objects. You were asking about managing those heavier grocery bags, right?
Exactly. Sometimes those bags feel like they're getting heavier every week.
Well, the book actually has a specific technique for lifting that protects your back by engaging the right muscles. It's fascinating how these simple movements, things we do all the time, become so important for our ability to function well
Right.
as we get older.
It's like we need to be more intentional about how we move now
Yeah,
so we can keep moving freely later.
precisely. Now, let's loop back to inflammation, something we touched on earlier. I know you're trying to eat healthier,
Yes.
and the book does a great job of clarifying how different types of inflammation actually affect us. You mentioned vegetable oils.
Yeah, they mentioned vegetable oils. What about those?
Right. So they explain that while some information is good, it's part of the healing process. The kind that's triggered by things like processed foods or stress, lack of sleep, that's harmful.
Right.
It's like a slow-burning fire inside, silently contributing to all sorts of problems.
Oh, wow.
And some of those vegetable oils, the kind that are commonly found in processed foods, can actually fan those flames.
So even if I'm cutting back on junk food, I still need to pay attention to those hidden ingredients.
Exactly. It's about making informed choices, like choosing olive oil or coconut oil instead of those inflammatory ones. And it's not just about food. They recommend prioritizing sleep,
Yeah.
managing stress through those techniques we talked about earlier,
Right.
and incorporating exercise to help combat that inflammation.
It really is a holistic approach.
Yeah.
Considering all these different aspects of our lives.
And since we're talking about that holistic well-being,
Yeah.
let's shift gears to something that's particularly relevant for women over 50.
Okay.
Hormones. You expressed concern about how hormonal changes might be affecting you.
Yes. Especially with menopause on the horizon. It's something I've been thinking about a lot.
The book really delves into how those changes, especially during menopause, impact everything, from bone health to mood and energy levels. It
Yeah.
can feel like a roller coaster. They encourage women to understand these changes and seek professional guidance
Okay.
if needed.
So it's not something I should just try to tough out on my own.
Definitely not. They also highlight the importance of calcium and vitamin D intake,
Right.
especially during menopause, to protect that bone health.
That makes sense. It feels like we're losing bone density as we age,
Yeah.
which is a bit scary.
It is a concern, but the good news is there are things we can do
Oh, okay.
to mitigate those risks. And the book, again, provides natural ways to support that hormonal balance through diet, exercise, stress management, all things we've been discussing.
So all these pieces are starting to fit together. It's not just about isolated actions. It's about a whole lifestyle shift.
Exactly. And speaking of lifestyle shifts, let's circle back to resistance training. I know you were hesitant about joining a gym, but remember, the book emphasizes that you don't need one to get stronger.
Right. They mentioned a guide to the top 5 exercises for people over 50, which seems like a good place to start. But I'm still a little worried about doing it wrong and hurting myself.
That's understandable, but they actually provide really clear instructions and emphasize the importance of that proper form to avoid injuries.
Okay, good.
And they remind us to listen to our bodies, not push to the point of pain.
Right.
It's about finding a sustainable routine that you enjoy, not punishing yourself.
That's reassuring. It feels a lot less intimidating when you put it that way.
And remember, even small amounts of resistance training can make a big difference. You don't have to become a power lifter overnight.
Small steps, consistency, that's the key.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, let's touch on something we haven't discussed in detail. Mental wellness.
Okay.
You mentioned feeling stressed lately.
Yeah. Stress seems to be a constant companion these days.
Well, the book dedicates a whole section to the mind-body connection,
Right.
emphasizing how much our mental well-being actually impacts our physical health.
Mm.
And chronic stress can lead to, a whole host of problems, from heart disease to depression.
So it's not just about feeling overwhelmed, it's actually harming my body.
Unfortunately, yes.
Ah.
But the good news is there are really effective ways to manage that stress.
Okay, good.
And the book provides practical tips, like those mindfulness techniques, breathing exercises. They even highlight the power of laughter, which you said you enjoy.
Laughter is definitely good medicine. Are there other things we can do?
Connecting with loved ones or even seeking support from a therapist
Yeah.
can be incredibly helpful. The book even discusses research showing that something as simple as holding hands with a loved one can actually reduce pain.
Right.
It's a beautiful example of that mind-body connection.
That's incredible. It really highlights how we're not just physical beings, we're emotional and social beings too.
And Thriving Beyond 50 reminds us that all of these aspects are interconnected. They don't advocate for these, drastic changes, but rather for this gradual, sustainable approach. to incorporating these healthy habits into our lives. They offer tips for, improving sleep, choosing nutritious foods, even managing cravings, just setting us up for success.
It's a lot to take in, but it's so inspiring. It feels like a roadmap to a healthier and happier future.
I agree. And before we finish up, I want to touch on one last point that you were curious about, preventing falls.
Yes, that's a big concern for me, especially as I get older.
The book offers some excellent advice for improving balance and coordination, which are key factors in preventing falls.
Right.
They recommend incorporating simple exercises into your daily routine, like standing on one leg while you brush your teeth, or practicing getting up from the floor. We already talked about how important that movement is.
So I can improve my balance by doing things I already do,
Yeah.
just with a little more awareness.
Exactly. They also emphasize being mindful of our surroundings and taking steps to minimize those fall hazards in our homes, like removing tripping hazards or adding grab bars in the bathroom. It's about being proactive and creating a safe environment for ourselves.
This deep dive into thriving beyond 50 has been eye-opening, inspiring, and empowering. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to approach aging with intention and vitality.
I feel the same way. This book is a must-read for anyone who's committed to, really embracing this next chapter with energy and enthusiasm.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, but I hope you feel as inspired as I do to start incorporating some of these tips and tricks into our lives. And remember, aging doesn't have to be a downhill slide. It can be an opportunity for growth, discovery, and continued vitality. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep thriving.